episode 160 of the Just Passing Through podcast, another outside broadcast. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm outside. If you're listening, you can probably hear the wind rushing through my silvery hair that's underneath my bicycle helmet on this glorious September day, September the 12th. In the morning, I've just finished my online work and I've got myself out for a cycle. Instead of just wasting time sitting at home, I've decided to get out there. Now, it was September the 11th yesterday, and for them of a certain age, or even people younger than me, that is a big day, because that was the day that people around the world switched on the TV and thought they were watching a fucking movie. And it turned out to be the greatest piece of reality TV the world has ever seen, especially when that second plane slammed into the Second World Trade Center. It were an unbelievable thing to watch. Now, is America finally growing up? Because yesterday, I can't remember a single word being mentioned about the World Trade Center or anything like that, which is a welcome change. Now, I'm going to switch the camera around to give you a point of view of where I'm cycling at the moment. There you go. So you've got a better view of that. Now, okay, so there was no mention of the Twin Towers yesterday. There was no mention of the planes hitting the World Trade Center. Has America grown up? Well, what there was yesterday instead, just to keep America in the news, was that presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Now, the thing that struck me is, I didn't watch it, obviously, because I've got a fucking life. But I did see some of the highlights of it on telly, on Japanese telly, because my wife were watching news when I came home from work. So I'm sat at the dinner table doing some online work. My wife's watching news, and when Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Biden is speaking, what they do is they let you listen to it in the English and they put the translations underneath. And what they picked up on, like most people around the world, most news stations around the world, wasn't the policies, wasn't what the future's going to hold, wasn't anything like that. What they picked up on was Donald Trump talking about the way that these migrants are streaming over the border and eating everybody's pets in these border towns like El Paso in California and Texas. The pets are disappearing. These migrants are streaming over the border and they are eating your cat and eating your dog. Totally unfounded. I think Donald Trump has heard this. I think his running mate mentioned something like this, and he's taken that ball and he's just run with it. Now, when I heard this, you've got to laugh to yourself. The fact that these migrants are coming out of El Salvador, Nicaragua, all these places which are so fucking dodgy. You know, they're under threat, their family's going to get wiped out, so they think, fuck this. I'm going to that shining light on the hill. I'm going to try get into America. And then you get into America and you're surrounded by all this wealth and you just decide, that cat's got a bit of meat on its bones. Let's tuck into that. So the last thing I'm reaching for is a feline when I've just been running away from these fucking drug cartels that have raped my grandmother and strung up my toddler kids. I'm not going to be doing that to chow down on a cat. But saying that, is it that bad? Is it that bad to chow down on a dog or a cat? Or maybe your niece's gerbil? Is it that bad when you see how bad the food is in America? I mean, you could imagine them. They're down to the last, $5, and they're going to Burger King, and they sit down, and this is America. This is what we've travelled all this way from. All this way for. You sit down, you get your double Whopper, your onion rings, tomato sauce, mustard, French fries, lathered with salt, and then you get yourself a massive bucket of Coca-Cola. You've travelled thousands and thousands of miles dodging human traffickers. You've got yourself across the Rio Grande. You know, you've nearly lost your kids. They weren't strapped to you properly. Your wife went missing a few days ago. You think that she's probably earning money in a brothel somewhere in South Mexico, but there's no way of getting in touch with her. You get yourself into Burger King. You take your first bite of a double Whopper. The endorphins kick in and you fucking devour it. Then you're down to your last dollar. You get yourself another one. You devour that. The kids have got a smile on their face for the first time in months. You've made it. You fucking made it. And then 5 minutes later, you're squatting over a blocked toilet surrounded by shit-covered toilet paper because your stomach can't handle it. Your stomach can't handle all that fat, all that sugar, all that salt, and your guts have just blown out your stomach. Your guts have just blown out your body. They're wanting to get out of your body like you wanted to get out of South America and Central America. They are running for that water. They just want to get that food out of you. So when you think of it like that, if this tabby cat's walking past, that would be the more desirable meal. And I mean, they've been travelling in a caravan of people for a few months. You know, what must they have eaten on the way up here? They'd have been into the rats, the frogs, all that sort of shit. So maybe a fattened up American cat that's had 5 years chowing down on kitty cat, chowing down on better food than they've probably eaten in the last few months. You know, that would be a welcome change. So who knows? The fellow that we're interviewing called out his bullshit. Trump obviously doesn't agree with it because he doesn't agree with anybody that disagrees with him. But to say that it hasn't happened, to say that someone's pet hasn't disappeared in these border states, disappeared from the garden and onto some migrant's plate to keep the kids and themselves alive, to say that that hasn't happened, I would say is a bit of a stretch. Where have they gone? Have coyotes responsible for them all disappearing? No, of course not. There's some fella from Paraguay that's gently dabbing the side of his mouth, giving a chef's kiss to the heavens, while pulling the whiskers out of his teeth. And he's thinking to himself, welcome to America. And I tell you, his kids, in about 20 or 25 years' time, will have come up with some company that is changing the way the world is. And they'll come up with that story of how back in 2024, the dad got them to America, and the first meal over the border with this cat or this dog, just to keep them going so they could get themselves to Los Angeles or to Austin, just so they can plant their flag. That will be a story in a few years' time. And then we'll go back to Trump yesterday, talking about migrants eating Fido or your tabby. And they'll go, well, he won't lying. He won't lying. But you could see these people in bars and pubs with the drinks, and they've gone out with their friends to a pub to watch this shit. And I don't know if this is conducted in the evenings, during the day, but these bars were full. These bars were full to just watch an old man and a middle-aged woman talk about what they're going to do in the next 4 years. And then 4 years from now, you'll go back to this and you'll realise they've done nothing. But I could not imagine the British public going to a pub on a Tuesday night or a Monday night to watch Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak have a debate about what the next 4 years holds for England. I do not know anybody that would do that. So why the Americans do it, I mean, the Americans have got so much things that they could be doing. So many things you can do in America. Yet they choose to WhatsApp the mates and decide, yeah, let's go to a bar and watch these have a debate. It just seems odd. Very odd. It's an odd country. Anyway, enough of your politics. Enough of your politics. The second story, surprisingly enough, is from America. And it's a story about Wells Fargo. Now, Wells Fargo, obviously they started as a stagecoach company, taking money and valuables across the Wild West. And now it's like a massive bank. And the story that interested me, which I just picked up on a couple of days ago, is this woman that worked for them. I think it was in Arizona or Colorado, one of the mountain states. So she'd gone into work one day, 60-year-old, she sat in a cubicle and she died. She died in a cubicle. Now, somebody dying at work, obviously it's any loved one that dies, it's a sad story. But this woman had been dead at a desk in a busy office in her cubicle. She had been slumped over her computer for 4 days and nobody knew. Nobody knew. Now, when you see these stories, these reality TV stories on the TV, and you see these old people that have died, and the fucking mail is mounting up outside postbox, but the neighbours never report it. And then about 6 or 7 years later, there's a house call, and they go in and there's this fucking skeleton sat in front of the telly. Telly's still on, lights are still on, but the old deer's been fucking sat there for 6 or 7 years. Those stories are fascinating to me, because these people have obviously got no family, or they were an absolute cunt to the family when they were younger, so the families don't have any contact with them. The neighbours don't seem to give a fuck. I mean, how bad must your apartment building be where a person rotting on the settee for 7 years doesn't raise any sort of suspicion? In 1992, just after I got out of the military, I worked for Bradford Council. I worked for Bradmet. And it was a great job. But for a week, I worked with this fella who I was, only after working for him for a week, I was convinced he was going to get me locked up and put in prison. And I ended up working with him for about 3 months and we made a fucking fortune. But for that 3 months, for that 3 months, I honestly thought that the police would be coming knocking at my door. And what we did for 3 months was, around Bradford you've got these council flats, council houses. And what happens is they'll put older people in these apartment builders, they'll give them ground floor flats. And when they die, they're going to have been there for quite a while. And you've just got to go in and empty that apartment. They've got no relatives, nothing. So I'd been working with this fella. First day, we were up in an area called Ollerton. We went into this ground floor flat, the coroner were just leaving, and he just said, here, take this, and he gave us a tub of Vicks. Now Vicks, for them that don't know, is this really strong cream that you put on kids' chests and under your nose when you've got a bad chest cold. It helps with your breathing. I mean, in the early 90s, you'd rub it on your neck when you took ecstasy, and it'd keep the high going for a lot longer. Anyway, passed us this Vicks, said put that under your nose because he's been dead in his bed for about a week or two. So put it on, went in. Obviously body's gone, but all because he'd been cooking up in bed for 10 days, all the liquids had drained out of him onto the mattress. So we walked in, I was immediately sick on myself. The fella's just laughing at me. So we get the mattress out, which was looking dripping. It was dripping. Threw it in the back, on the bottom, and then we proceeded to empty out his apartment. When I'd stopped being sick on myself and we'd got the mattress in the van, the fella said to me, biscuit tins, books. Do not throw them on the van until you've looked through them all. Any tin, any book, go through the pages of the book, and any pension books, give them to me, because we'll hand them in. And then he said, when he said, because we'll hand them in, he gave me a cheeky little grin. I thought, what's all that about? I mean, you've got to remember, I was only 21 years old. He was in his mid-40s. So, in we go. I'll never forget the number. It was 147 empty bottles of cheap sherry that we pulled out of his house. So he'd obviously an alky. The curtains hadn't been open in a good few years, I expect. It was just a filthy apartment. The fella wasn't spending that much money. So I remember going through this, I found this tin. It was a Fox's tin, opened it, and what I thought was a fucking bundle of money turned out to be air miles. Now, in the UK at turn at 90s, every time you filled up your car, you got these air miles. Now this fella had 700 of them. So the bloke were on my shoulder. He said, oh, you have them, they're no good to me. So I got them, I ended up selling them. I made about 150 quid selling them. Then we proceeded to go through all the books. There was, in the bookshelf that this fella had, it was like confetti, tenors and fivers just raining out. He found a small pasta container, this metal container. He opened it up. Inside of that container there was 450 quid. 450 quid. So he counted it out. He dropped me 200. He kept 250 for himself. And then he found the pension book. Now when he found the pension book, he held it up, smiled, put the pension book in his back pocket. He took the 250 quid out and gave me 50 quid. So I had 50 quid more than him, but he had the pension book. And because I was so naive at the time, I didn't think out of it. Turns out, about 2 or 3 years later, I'd moved on from that job. He's down at magistrate court, gets himself 2 years. He'd been caught cashing in pensions for over 50 pensioners for years. So I have no idea how much money he made. The magistrate had no idea. So he just give him a random sentence and charge him $3,000. But from what we pulled from that one alcoholic's flat, that $3,000 must have been a nothing burger to him. Absolute nothing burger to him. Anyway, going back to this Wells Fargo story. This woman had a massive heart attack at her desk, keeled over and died. Now this is a working office. This is a working office where workers are coming in 24 hours a day. There were cleaners cleaning up at night. She was slumped over her computer for 4 days. And it wasn't until her manager, who was sending her emails, and these emails weren't getting answered. After about 4 days, she went for the 30-second walk from her office to this worker's office and then realised she were dead. Nobody had checked in on her. Nobody had asked if how her day were going. Nobody had offered her a cup of coffee. Now, I immediately think, because I'm Mr. Negativo, how much of an arse must this woman have been? You know? Nobody's checking in on her, the poor lass. Or she's one of those really annoying fucks. One of those really, really annoying fucks, you know, that has to be everybody's fucking friend. And then that day that annoying fuck doesn't say anything to you or just shuts up for a day, everybody remembers that one fucking day. It's like being at school. You go to school for fucking 12 years. You can't remember fuck all about a day at school, but you remember that one day when a dog ran in playground when you were in middle school, and every kid in that school playground wanted to play with dog. I remember that fucking day. I don't remember all else. I mean, I'd give my fucking high teeth for a job like that. To be able to just go off radar for 4 days and nobody knows you're missing. How great would that be? I mean, not this job, but the previous job I had. Fucking hell. If that fucking Norwegian woman that I worked with 2 jobs ago had dropped dead at side of me, I would have just kept fucking shut, and I was stood next to her. I'd be sat next to her. If she dropped dead, I would not say a fucking thing. If she started choking on a bit of food and she were asking me to eat her back, I'd just ignore it. I'd let her fucking choke. But this woman, I mean, her family didn't even call. Her family didn't even call work and say, "Where's my mother? I hadn't spoken to my mother for a few days." I mean, I assume she were married. I assume she had somebody at home that were wondering where she was. It appears not. It appears that you can go to Wells Fargo, sit down at your desk on a busy Monday or Tuesday, start your work, keel over just before lunch, and just be in that position for 4 days. Shocking. Unless staff workers were having a bit of fun with her. You know, if one of your co-workers who you weren't really that keen on drops dead at work, are you going to do some selfies? Are you going to bend her over photocopier and photocopy her tits? Have your face photocopied next to hers? You pretend to be dead, she is dead. Upload it on Facebook. One of these people are dead. I'd be having a lot of fun with it before I notified the authorities. So those are the two stories. Those are the two stories I picked up on from America. Two old people talking about what they're not going to do in the next 4 years, and a woman that were dead at a desk for 4 days and nobody fucking noticed. I mean, I hold my loved ones near and dear, and the few friends that I've got, I enjoy their company. But if I were to drop dead, I would want somebody to notice that I were gone. Just one. I'm not bothered about being remembered after I'm gone, but if I did go missing, I would want somebody to raise the alarm. And that's all you want. That's all I ask for. A simple life of a simple man. If I go missing on this bike ride today, this podcast is going to be lost forever. But if they do recover me, they'll go through this podcast for evidence to see what the fuck happened, and it'll be uploaded anyway, and I'll be on some true crime story. If this podcast doesn't turn up on a true crime story, it appears that I got home safely and nobody had to raise the alarm. So let's see where episode 160 ends up. And I will turn the camera around now and I'll face you as I say adios. And I'm going to get on with this bike ride. See you soon, folks. Episode 160. It's got a 0 at the end.